Hello everybody, and welcome back to What Does Jesus Teach? Today we're going to continue with a series of Anti-Osas teachings from Jesus. And today we're going to talk about what he taught regarding the faithful and unfaithful servant. So, let's go ahead and jump in. Alright, and again, as consideration, if you like these videos, like them, share them, etc., you know how YouTube works. The more that happens, the more it reaches people. If you don't agree, then hit the dislike button. That's okay too. And any comments are appreciated, and I try to interact as much as I can. Okay, we went through the purpose in the first part of the series, but again, it's just to demonstrate how clearly Jesus teaches against once saved, always saved teaching. Again, I'm going to break down some of his teachings, and as I will do here today. Okay, the faithful and unfaithful servant. Now, before we get to that, I want to show the verses prior, just to kind of get the setting of where this kind of begins. So in Matthew 24, 42 through 44, I'll go ahead and read it. It says, "Therefore be on alert, for you do not know which day your Lord is coming. But be sure of this, that if the head of the house had known at what time of the night the thief was coming, he would have been on the alert and would not have allowed his house to be broken into. For this reason you must also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not think he will." Okay, so we see here a call for the servants to remain ready for the call and for the coming of Jesus. He's very clear. This is ending after he talks about that no one knows the day or the hour and so on, and he's saying it here again. You don't know the day, you don't know the hour of his return, so we must be ready for that return. And immediately after, he goes into the story of the faithful and unfaithful servant, or the options, as I would say. Okay, so let's begin. Verse 45, right after that, it says, "Who then is a faithful and sensible slave whom his master put in charge of his household to give them their food at the proper time? Blessed is that slave whom his master finds so doing when he comes. Truly I say to you that he will put him in charge of all his possessions." Okay, so again, so Jesus shows that this slave is put in charge of his household to feed them. This slave will be blessed if the master returns and the master finds that slave doing what was asked of him. The slave will also be blessed by being put in charge of all the possessions of the master, again, if he's found faithful. Now that's an amazing promise that Jesus describes here. It's pretty awesome. Now, to be transparent, the master represents the Lord. The slave of the master represents someone who got saved, obviously because the Lord will not grant you responsibility over other people like that, on the earth if you're a never saved person. So a never saved person is not the recipient of a promise of being in charge of anything that belongs to the Lord. Again, I think everybody generally would agree with that. So let's get a visual. All right, so we have the master. Again, he puts his slave in charge, and if the slave is found faithful upon the return of the master, the faithful slave gets put in charge of all the master's possessions. Again, pretty straightforward, exactly what he said. Kind of go from master, slave put in charge. If they're found faithful, he gets rewarded by being in charge of possessions of the master. Ultimately, again, saved person gets put in charge of things of the master on the earth. And of course, this is the reward after. Okay, now let's continue with the teaching from Jesus. Now, Matthew 24, 48 through 51, the 3 verses after, let's read that. It says, "But if that evil slave says in his heart, 'My master is not coming for a long time,' and begins to beat his fellow slaves and eat and drink with drunkards, the master of that slave will come on a day where he does not expect him, at an hour which he does not know." Again, you see the reference here about an hour which he does not know. It ties to the first passage that we went through. Okay. "And will cut him in pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." So now Jesus is saying that if the slave he puts in charge ends up beating up other slaves or getting drunk and is found this way when he returns, the master will cut him into pieces. Not only that, he will be assigned a place with the hypocrites, which is another word that we typically use in scripture for unbelievers. So let's take a look at this visually. All right. So this gives us a clear visual of what Jesus said, right? Jesus basically gave, if you put everything together, he gave his slaves 2 options. His slaves, which are people who got saved, must make the choice to be faithful until he returns, or you can choose to be unfaithful. Both options are available to each saved person. The unsaved person doesn't get that choice. The never saved person, referred to as a hypocrite or unbeliever, will be joined by the unfaithful previously saved person. So what do I mean here? Okay, so if we look at the screen here, so we got the master over here. He's going to put a slave in charge, right? Again, the Lord does not put one of his servants in charge of anything if you're not a born-again believer. All right, so in this case, this slave ended up, because he got tired of waiting or whatever, decided, you know what? He just turned to unfaithfulness, right? He said he started beating up other slaves and being drunk and so on. So it says here, the slave was put in charge and not found faithful. And as a result, the unfaithful slaves gets cut into pieces and sent to a place with the hypocrites or unbelievers. Yeah, it's kind of really clear. Both options show someone who got saved. One went this route, the positive route, and one went the negative route. Now, here's the error. If once saved, always saved were true, then both the faithful and unfaithful slave would still enter the kingdom. However, we see that if a slave put in charge by the Lord, the master, later becomes unfaithful and is found that way, his end is the same as a never saved person, as seen here as a hypocrite. Jesus makes it clear that an unfaithful person is cut into pieces and is cast away with the unbelievers. Again, for once saved, always saved to be true, both options would still lead to being with the Lord and finding a place with fellow believers. But that is not, that's just not the fate for the slave of Christ who chooses to be unfaithful. Sorry for my misspelling there. It's the fate for the slave of Christ. If once saved, always saved was true, you would find that he wouldn't have been cut to pieces. Maybe he wouldn't have gotten rewarded by, being given, managerial duties over the possessions of the master, but he still would have been welcomed in. He wouldn't have been kicked out somewhere else. But you see that the one that got the rewards also got in. The one that was unfaithful just got cut to pieces, didn't get anything. He got kicked out. So that would be the error of once saved, always saved on that one. Okay, so again, we see here again that we have a clear language from Jesus himself regarding what happens to a person who gets saved and later makes a choice to be unfaithful to the Lord. Let us be diligent to not be found this way when the Lord returns, so we can join the rest of the faithful who are blessed to be with the Lord forever. Do not believe the lie of the once saved, always saved doctrine, which you can see is directly contrary to the teachings of Jesus. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.